This is Barbara Ledinsky, and I'd like to invite you to participate in tonight's conversation that we have with Mary Dumas. She is going to be talking about graphic art, how to market your art, how to keep the intellectual property of your art, selling your art online and in person with the right contracts, how to get a professional photographer to have really good digital pictures of your art, and how to rent a piece of art for a book cover. All of the things that all of us know as artists, when you sell a piece of art, it's gone. You have no control over what happens after. It could be mass-produced, and you have no say over it. So Mary is going to cover all that today. So I'd like to introduce Mary Dumas. Mary has a studio at Western Avenue in Lowell, Mass. It's called Pop Cultural Place. It's on the second floor. And it's a very unique kind of interesting shop, so we recommend this coming Saturday is open studio for Western Ave, so that you can definitely make a stop over at Western Avenue and go in and talk to Mary in person. So please come over, and I'll introduce Mary now, and she will be taking care of the show from now on. Okay, Mary?
Yes, hello. This will be my first time making presentations in this nature, so please forgive me if I start to sound like Porky Pig. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, what brought me to this position was that I started working with another artist and putting together a comic book together. And this happened about 7 years ago. It was a lark. We didn't think much about it as being highly important or intellectual property, anything like that. And yet we started watching other comic book artists working with web comics and self-publishing and doing all the things that are now pretty much the way that it works to make a book published. And so we ran Kickstarters, and we published on Amazon.com in their KDP free to publish area. And all along the way, I was learning many things about the way that it's important to protect your art out there in the great big international digital world. Part of that is because people don't think that anybody owns it if it's online. They just pull it down, say, this is cool, I'm going to put it up on my Facebook page, and they never mention that an artist made this, or that this is from a specific book or a comic book or anything of that nature. It's not that they are being a bad person, it's that they don't understand how much work goes into making any art piece. And specifically when you're starting to think about making a comic book. Comic books aren't just, those floppy things that you look at on the old newspaper stands anymore. They run a gamut. They're not just about guys in capes, darling. They're about everything. And so they're really becoming part of what librarians and teachers are looking at as real valuable reading materials for kids and adults. Now, of course, my comic book starts out as a teen comic book and ends up being a young adult graphic novel by the end. So I tend to say, take mine with a grain of salt, because it is for the young adult crowd. That said, there used to be something called the comics. There was an institution within the comic book community where you had to write things within a certain moral standard. And that went out the window in 2005. So anything goes for a comic book in this day and age. You just have to be very careful about how you rate it and who you're aiming it at. If it's for kids, let them know it's for kids. If it's not for kids, let them know it's definitely not for kids. Highly important. Now, beyond the comic books, because of the comic books, I started understanding how to work with publishing. And I started realizing that there's a lot of art within just plain books. Covers of books are art. Covers of storylines are art. Sometimes art can be very boring and not really attract your attention. Although the people that are looking specifically for this historical book will be very excited to find it. But it is kind of dull if you want to think about it that way. And most things nowadays sell because people see the cover, and the cover is worth 1,000 words. It's more than just information about what this story might be about or the name of the story. Oftentimes it really needs to include things that get somebody excited to look at and say, oh, I want to read that book because that looks so cool. That said, sometimes when you use photographic art with individuals, you end up with problems. And those problems can be, as an example, models that they're using might all of a sudden say, well, I didn't sign the right releases for that, so if anybody wants to use that on their book, they're going to have to pay me additionally and separately. And that is why I think that artists have a very strong value, because that person can't sue you as a model if you used it in a different format or way that you'd signed on to use it. So we've got comics as an art in books, and we've got covers as an art in books. Where do they come from? They come from artists, and artists need to learn how to sell themselves to these particular product areas. Another thing about art as books is the art book. Now, I've helped my friend at the Western Avenue Studios in Lowell put together this art book because he had made a number of small paintings, each one individually painted, each one selling for approximately $100, which is very low, in my opinion, for a personalized individual piece of art, but that's what they would sell for. And we came up with a concept that why not let people have all of his art pieces? Instead of just publishing them one at a time, we took all of them and made them into 8x10 portraitures so that anybody who's interested in perhaps taking all of them out and making them into a collage on their bathroom wall or whatever else they want to do with them, they have the opportunity to do it for $35 instead of how many hundreds of dollars each of these paintings, and they are paintings, are worth.
Now, can you explain a little bit about the contract work that would have to be done to put something like that together?
Right.
Yes.
So I helped him put it together, and it was at his request. Mm-hmm. So the contract that was written is called a work-for-hire contract.
Okay.
That means all I'm doing is what he has asked me to do and is paying me to do. And at the end, I own nothing because I worked for hire. That's what happens with most comic book artists as well, and why you might, if you ever look into it, find out that Stan Lee was not exactly popular among his artists because he owned it all and they didn't, and Captain America became his big bread and butter winner, but not for the artist who created him. So work for hire contract is important in one way, but it's something to maybe avoid in other ways. It's really up to you. Now, the fun thing about putting this together was I learned as much as my artists did about this. You'll notice on the inside here that it's got gray pages on the back section. We originally wanted it to have white pages on the back section. So this was our first not for resale copy, and they had white pages. But then we took it to our bookbinder there at Western Avenue Studios and said, what is wrong with this book? It's curling up on both ends, and it's only going to get worse. And he said, well, Mary, you've published comic books where there's art on both sides of the page. You know why they're nice and flat? Because there's art and printed material on both sides of the page. So that is why just laying this tiny little bit of gray on the back of the pages made it a nice flat book that will last for a long time.
That's interesting. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, but that's why it's great to be in Western Avenue Studios, because you can walk upstairs and talk to another artist about what situational problem you're having. Even the seamstresses love to be able to walk next door and say, do you have orange thread? Anyway, so that's what I wanted to present about art as books. But now there's also art as a commodity. You know that when you sell your art piece, it's one beautiful large piece, and you're at an art show or auction or one of those tents that they put up and everybody's selling art around you. And the average person that's buying from you is buying a commodity, your art. And most of them are just going to take it home and put it on their wall and enjoy it. There are others who will take it home because they're investors and they've looked at your gray hair and said, I wonder how long they're going to live. They're the ones that think that they're going to come up with the next Banksy or whatever. But, that's a completely different offshoot of art buyers. They're not the kind of people that we're talking about. Then there's the people that are secondary market. So they bought a piece of art from you, and their friend says, I'm going to take a picture of that and use it for the cover of my book. And they think nothing of it. Now, this is where you got to pay attention as an artist. You should really always have a file in your tent or wherever you're selling that has a contract in it that says, I'm selling you this piece of art, but you cannot sell it in any other way. It cannot be in digital form. It cannot be sent on the internet. It cannot be used as a book cover. It cannot be used in any way except as art in your home or on your property. And that's a very simple contract. All you have to do to find one is go online and look for the secondary market, secondary use contract. If you can't find one, the easiest place to find one just like that is the Graphic Artists Guild online. They have all these kinds of contracts ready to go.
So even if you put a copyright on your work, I know a number of artists who always say, tag it with a copyright. That's not enough.
The secondary market can cut off the little thing that has a copyright on it, or they can etch it out with their digital art. Just signing it doesn't help anymore.
If they're willing to do that, why would they honor a contract?
It's not that will they honor a contract as opposed to if you took them to court over the use of your property, your intellectual property, can you prove that you own that property? Can you, if you don't have it in your home anymore or among your books anymore?
So I'm not a photographer. And I've been a commercial photographer, an art photographer, and one thing in photography is that...
Excuse me, can you come up and talk over here? Because we have a hard time. The person who's doing this is not able to hear you.
Oh, that's okay. Sure.
Can you come over and talk to the microphone, please?
Yeah, so in photography, by international law, U.S. is a signatory to it, the photographer owns the copyright. If I take a picture, and unless I've assigned it to somebody else, I'm the copyright holder.
Right.
And if somebody used that, say in a commercial use or some other use, I would easily be able to sue them. And it happens fairly regularly. Are paintings different from that? Does copyright law not cover paintings?
Now, I'm not an attorney.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with that. But from my understanding, my readings, and dealing with my own attorney,
Sure.
I will tell you that the slight difference is that you taking a photograph of her oil painting, who does it belong to?
Well, the photograph belongs to her, but the image on the painting doesn't belong to me, so I wouldn't be able to...
So could you sell that image on your photograph without having a contract with her that you're allowed to do that?
Well, let's say I took a picture of a photograph. Let's say I took a picture of an Ansel Adams photograph. That wouldn't mean that his photograph belongs to me because he owns the copyright. So what I'm asking is, does the painter own the copyright to his painting?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
then-
all copyright comes right out of your mind and becomes your, if I'm writing
Right.
a letter, it's a copyrighted letter.
Right.
But if you really want the protection of the United States government, for one thing, having contracts and on top of that, registering your painting as a copyrighted item
Yeah.
can really help
It
you in the
speeds it
long
up or
run.
make it
Yeah,
facilitates it.
it makes things cleaner
Yeah.
if a problem should arise.
I see. All right.
You're welcome. Anyway, now the next part that I wanted to bring in was publishing. because obviously publishing is another way that you can put your art out, whether it be as a cover of a book, or as an art book, or as yourself selling your work, your abilities as a comic book artist, for example.
I've got a
So,
question. When you talk about publishing and publishing for a cover for an art book, are there particular agencies that handle something like that?
there are
you're
lots,
interested in
there
doing
are
that?
lots coming up online. There's a lot of .coms that are stepping forward, and they contact, or they are in contact with the artist. They have a whole sheaf of paintings and so forth that can be picked from and used by book cover persons, you know, people who are self-publishing, or even the industries, you know, the publishers, that they can then take that picture, design the words that will go on the picture, and then, you know, it will become a cover of a painting. Now, the thing is it's all within a secondary marketing area. It's kind of like you as the artist will sign a contract with that company to say that they can sell the digital copy of your art, and it would be in perpetuity, or it would be for the use only of, or, you know, all these little additions that would need to be brought into it. So there's lots of places that will do that. I honestly don't know how much money an individual artist will make on those.
No, I'm curious if it's a lucrative offer, you know, way to make some cash. Or
It could very well be, but as an artist, you need to already do the advanced work of having it digital, okay? So if you've done a beautiful oil painting, somebody's going to have to take a photograph of it that's digital and that can be used. And that's where you have to already have that contract with your photographer, that you can prove to this company that you're the rightful owner of that project. So if you hired the photographer to take a picture of your painting, that's a work for hire contract. Once he's done it and has turned it over to you, he's completed his contract with you, you now own that digital copy of your art. And then you can do what you want with it. But that's why contract is important. Work for hire is one of the most important ones. Okay, so I was going to talk about publishing art. So this is going to be my next comic book. It's about a group of men who started here at Fort Devens as combat engineers in World War II. And then I have my artist prepare a couple of paint pictures that I think might make a good cover, or he and I together think might make a good cover, and they come out like that. And then I pass it to my letterer, and the letterer and I come up with what I want the front cover to look like. So I want it to look like somebody's torn it out of their scrapbook, thank you. Their scrapbook. So that's how the cover of one of the issues is going to look. Now, some people have said, what do they look like before you get into that level? Well, this is a copy of the script of one of my sections. It starts out with some preliminary photographs so the artist knows what I'm talking about. And then this is the script. It looks boring. It looks dull. It has all the information that they need because I'm telling them things like 2 large explosions occur, clearing the hedges. He already knows what the hedges look like because I sent him pictures of that. Leaving German bodies and body parts scattered in the opening. That's where you converse with your artist, or you trust your artist. I'm one that trusts my artist. I know he's not a stupid man, and he knows how dead bodies are going to look in the book. Anyway, so what happens at the end of all this typewritten pages is the art. And the art becomes something that is more than just a novel. It is now a graphic novel, or as in the vernacular, a comic book. So, and then of course, you know, the next step is the letterer, and they put all the word bubbles in and make sure that things flow so that the reader can understand. Although there are comic books that are very popular that haven't got one word in them. The story is told by the sequential art, period. There's nothing else in those books except the sequential art. And I personally think some of them are spectacular.
What are the most popular type of comic books right now?
It depends on your age group. Batman and Superman will always be popular, but they're pretty much fandom stories now. They're about people who already know who Superman and Batman are, and they don't need any in-depth storytelling or any back scenes or anything like that. So basically, the current crop of everything that's existed since the 1940s and is still in existence are what I like to refer to as fan stories. People who already know about those particular characters and they want to see what's next with them, okay? So that's Batman, Superman, anything with the Marvel Universe, all of those sorts of things. The next most popular is something called manga. And actually, at this point in time, manga is more popular overall than comic books are. Manga is a word for comics. That's Japanese. The Japanese manga has this interesting way of publishing in that they do completed stories. They don't have ongoing stories. Like, you know, when you buy a Superman, you can pick up a Superman from 1986 and pick up a Superman from 2006, and they're really, really reasonably the same story. Whereas manga tells the story, period, ends at one point, beginnings at one point, and doesn't keep going on and on and on. That said, let me take back a little bit of that because there's very popular manga that are turned into anime, which is, you know, comic, it's like the Flintstones. They do tend to have an ongoing stories that they keep putting in more and more and more because it makes them money to have this live action comic on, where it's not the norm. In normal manga, it can be up to 18. I've seen as many as 23 issues, and they're all comic books that are about 180 pages, no color in them, and that's how come they can produce them very quickly. Oftentimes it will say by thus and so art, you know, thus and so author, period. That's all it'll say on it. Then you turn the page and there's like 20 lists of names of the rest of the people that produce this one comic book. Now, independent comic book writers, we don't have that kind of joy. we have to figure out how to pay for it ourselves. And so budgeting becomes a really important aspect and part of being an independent comic book writer. You have to be able to write it. You have to be able to figure out how you're going to pay your artist if you want it to be a work for hire. I've also done one that was a cooperative. So she has money and I have money when it sells. But in the meantime, it doesn't sell. You know, neither of us are making anything off of it. But that's the risk you take when you're an independent comic book writer. Nowadays, and this is my next part, is how to make money with your art. The Etsy community has long been the place where people can sell shirts and purses and things that they've made, earrings, all that sort of stuff. But it's also a place where you can sell fine art. And the addition to that is that they also have a way of showing, of putting protections on your art so that, you know, that contracting I was talking about, it becomes contracted by selling it through Etsy. So nobody can take your Santa Claus that you've hand carved and hand painted and take it to China and dip it in resin and then sell it at Macy's because it's protected. It doesn't happen. Whereas that exact story right there happened to my own father-in-law. He's a wood carver. He carved a beautiful Santa Claus about that tall, hand-painted, hand-carved, sold it for $600. And the next Christmas, Macy's had it in resin. He didn't have a contract. He couldn't prove that he's the one that created this item. And so therefore, the guy who bought it just took it to his friendly neighborhood resin artist in China, and they made thousands of them, and he made the money. And there's nothing he could do about it. Again, if you can get contracts together, do it. They're easier than you think. As I said, the Graphic Artists Guild has them already in their book. You just tear them out and photocopy them. Fill in the lines that you need to do so that you're protecting yourself. Even if nothing ever comes of it, sometimes it's that one person that thinks, oh God, I don't want to be the one that gets arrested for doing illegal things. They might be the one that you're protecting yourself from. The one out of thousands of people you sold things to. There might be that one. And that's kind of important in this day and age of everything online, digital art, flashing everywhere. Everybody gets whatever they want. I'll cut and paste this and send it off on my Facebook page, or I'll cut and paste this and make it the headline of my note in TikTok. And I don't have to tell anybody who created this item. Now, it's kind of somewhat important when you find out that your item has made somebody, quite a few dollars, that you're the one that might see some of those dollars. Other than that, copyright, United States government, costs you about $75, but if you want to copyright 6 or 8 things at a time, it's $100, and you just keep copywriting things. It's not just for writers, it's for everybody. So I would copyright things if I was really intent on something, knowing that it was going to be something that could be sold as covers of books, advertisements on the side of the freeway, all those things that art is used for. You should really be paid for what you've accomplished as an artist, instead of it's just out there.
Yeah, I know a friend who did a picture, and then it ended up in a greeting card.
Yeah, that's one of the very many ways that your art becomes somebody else's property. Now, if he had done that picture and been paid for it up front by the greeting card company, that would have been a work for hire, and they could have done whatever they wanted with it, right? But instead, they bought the art and they photocopied it and used it, and that's really not right. Now, the next question is, can he prove it was his art? Probably not. Nowadays, we're much easier, much easier, because we've all got one of these things, and we can take pictures of our work in progress. That's another way of copywriting, having your work in progress there so that you can show somebody and say, see, I know that underneath that wave is this little squiggle of pencil, and if you look, you'll find it. And then, that's an easy way of doing it. It's unfortunate, it really is, but, I'm not sure what the rule is here in Massachusetts on the minimal amount of money that you use to go to court. But if you're a single individual and you haven't co-opted or you haven't incorporated, going to the small claims court, it can make you feel much better if somebody has taken your art.
Have you ever had an instance where you had to do that?
No, but I've seen Judge Judy rule on them. I'm about done with my presentation part, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Yes, sir. Yes, please.
So once you have a work that you're ready to publish, and you've done all the work with the artists and all the layout and the inking and the whole thing, what about the publishing part itself? Are you self-publishing? Are you going through a publisher? If you self-publish, how do you do that? How do you make sure the quality of the printing and the binding and all the other stuff is up to snuff? Do you hire an outside editor to review this stuff? How does it get distributed? So talk about the publishing, once the work is ready to actually go out into the world. Could you talk about that part a little bit?
Absolutely. Okay, so this is another whole convoluted story, so forgive me. There's one place right now that I highly recommend to people, and that's Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP. Now, as a norm, they're just publishing little books like this that are people's, self-published novels, right? But they're also very capable of covers that are hard covers. So they can do this kind of thing for you, if that's what you want. And they can publish full color. Well, this one's not full color. Well, it's kind of full color. They can publish full color things that are this small that you buy from them for $7 and you sell for yourself for $15, okay? They'll send you proofs, yes. They send you proofs, they also send you digital proofs. So if you don't want to spend the money on getting a proof to you, which is basically the postage, then you can certainly go about getting it sent a different way, digitally. And then sometimes, as you saw with my representation here, sometimes getting that physical proof proves to something to you that you wouldn't know without having it in hand and looking at it, like don't leave all the pages on the second page white. So it's not expensive to do it that way. I totally understand why people want to do it that way, and particularly if you're doing art books that way. You really do want it to come out printed the way it's supposed to. I had one instance where this particular book came out, and the way that they had done it was they accidentally cut the bottom. So all the pages were shifted up so that this brown didn't show, because they thought that was what it was supposed to look like. So I can't blame them. But I'm glad I had the first one printed so that they knew, no, I want that brown at the top. I really need that, because when I upsized it and put it into these pages, that particular way, DPI and measurement had to be reflective in both instances.
Do they give you a choice of bindings?
Yeah, they do, but honestly, I don't think they do the hand-stitched binding. In fact, I don't know any publisher in the United States right now that will do hand-stitched binding. Too much of our product moved over to China for use there, and I've got friends that have books that are coming in that they published, or they got their money for it from Kickstarters or independent ways of raising funds, and they sent them out to get published, and that was in 2020, and they still haven't seen their published books. It's nobody's fault. It's a big old germ that came in and wiped out a lot of stuff.
So what is the typical life cycle of putting together like that art book right there?
Okay, well, it starts out with Richard making all the art.
Right, okay.
That can take years and years and years, so don't start with that part of it. Take it from the point of ready process, okay? Point of, I've got these paintings and I need to do something with them. So he took them and got them all digitally photographed, okay? So they all have to be digital. There's no way around that. There's nothing like a good old photograph to get things going, okay?
Now, one of the topics that you mentioned was have a good photographer.
Have a good photographer.
What do you consider a good photography?
Well,
piece of photography of an art piece.
A photographer that can do art pieces is someone who's got special lighting to pick up the nuances of an oil painting. Those are things that just sticking it on your flatbed on your copy machine is not going to catch. They're either going to be overlighted, underlighted, or flattened out. So a good photographer who you would interview would be able to tell you that I can do oil painting photography, because that's somebody who knows that there's nuance within the colors and within the textures. Okay, so that's your first one right there, is looking for a good photographer. Your second thing is confirming that the photographer will do a work for hire contract, because once you're done with him, you really kind of want to be done with him. You don't want to worry about, if somebody offers me money to put my paintings in some catalog at Sotheby's. You don't want to be saying, well, but I got to go back to the photographer and find out if I can do that. No, you want to have a work for hire. Get it out of the way right up front so you don't have to think about it again. Then the second thing that you're going to do, because now you've got the product that you want to do, okay? So you take that product and you digitally, and this is somebody can be you can hire people to do this. It's not very expensive. You can digitally have them lay out each page of the book. And another example of that is the digitally designed bottom of each page so that you've got the name of the item printed right there. So that's something else that the digital artists are capable of doing for you. Then, of course, you want to make sure that you've got all the I's crossed and T's crossed and so forth with the law, and that's when you're going to do your legal page, which is always that piece of thing that says basically, I own this, it's my copyright, you can't take anything off this without asking my release. It also will say, no part of this book may be used or reproduced in any matter whatsoever without written permission, except in the case of brief quotations embodied in critical articles and reviews.
Now, do you need an ISBP number for that? No.
Well, you know what? The nice thing about Amazon is they'll give you an ISBN. Now, problem with that is that it's only an ISBN that's recognizable within the Amazon forest, okay? So if you're publishing with any desire to sell outside of the Amazon forest, then you have to go and buy your ISBN. Your ISBNs are not expensive. They're about $35 to $75 per book. You can buy them in packs of 10. And then, you know, you can publish to your heart's content on every kind of book you want. That's something that I'm not absolutely sure of the website that takes care of that. But it's a website that doesn't sound like it should be part of the U.S. government, and it's not really. But it's the main producer of these ISBNs that the United States government recognizes.
Is it Bowers?
That's it, thank you. Bowers is the name of the company that does all of this on behalf of the United States book publishing world. That said, these particular ISBNs can be found by people who want to buy a copy of this book in Timbuktu. Whereas if they're not hooked up with an Amazon purchase thing, they can't really purchase these books. They won't show up. The other semi-problematic thing about Amazon, which I think they're working on changing, because it used to be that you published your Amazon books through something called CreateSpace. And CreateSpace could then make copies and send them off to libraries, to other bookstores, all these sorts of things. But then when Amazon bought out CreateSpace and made it KDP, it became unavailable to the writers. It's been a big enough, there's been a big enough complaint about that throughout the writers' world that I think Amazon is trying to figure out a way to alter that so that your books can go on anybody's bookshelves or any store's bookshelves, and the store pays a good price for them instead of full price, or tries to find you and say, will you sell me, wholesale priced books? It's not tenable for a lot of people.
Do we have any questions from the audience that are to vote? Any questions from the audience here? Chris, do you want to come on and do something, please?
You had mentioned Western Avenue Studios, and I'm not sure if our audience, our video audience perhaps, would know where it is or what Western Avenue Studios are.
Oh, I'll be happy to address that question. Absolutely. Western Avenue Studios is the second largest art cooperative in the United States. There's about 350 artists there at any one time. Each artist rents their own studio space or rents with a partner. They keep the prices nice and low because they know it's for artists, and we're not lawyers. But the price is part of being there is that you're adding to the whole of this place. Like I can go upstairs and talk to the bookbinder, or I can go next door to the lady who sews tea towels and say, can you embroider me one that says da-da-da on it. It's a very cooperative area. It's located in Lowell, Massachusetts, which used to be quite the manufacturing location, but unfortunately, like everything else, it started going downhill. Luckily, a lot of the great, big, beautiful mill buildings are still alive and well there, and this is what Western Avenue Studio is located in, is a big, beautiful, turn of the 18th to 19th, like 1909 kind of mill building. They've torn out the whole insides and refurbished the whole thing, so all the walls are nice and clean, except when an artist gets a hold of them, and then they can paint things, anything they want on them. It's at 122 Western Avenue Studios in Lowell, and it's open every first Saturday of the month for open studios. That means that's your best time to go, because a lot of the artists will have their doors open. You can walk in and chat with them about what they're doing or where they're going or what the next step is. And then throughout the week, from Wednesday through Sunday, you can go to the gallery that's there. It's called the Loading Dock Gallery, and that's where they have a lot of representative art of the different artists that are in the building, including my comic books. Then there's, as you just walk around the building, we've left our paintings and everything on our walls everywhere. So if you're just walking through the building on a lovely Tuesday morning, you'll still get a real good representative idea of what's available at that place. If you need any kind of art done, or any kind of photography done, or any kind of sewing completed, there's somebody there that can do it for you. So I would definitely call that a real plus for the community.
Okay. I have no questions. Okay.
So we've talked about art books, we've talked about books with text in them. I'd like to hear about how you would publish a book, or what suggestions you would have for books that combine those. So for example, I write and I photograph and I make paintings and all this, but I don't have any skill in like choosing type fonts and layouts and all the typography that will go with that, and the layout of the photos and the artwork and all that.
Right.
So let's say I'm ready to publish a book and I want to try doing something like that. What kind of expertise would I hire to help me with it's kind of the graphic design of it. I don't know whether it would be separate specialties for the typography and the rest of it, but what kind of a person do I need to bring on board to do that aspect of the production before I was ready to, send my book out there?
Thank you for that question. There's a lot of different ways to go. The first thing I would say is look for a digital artist. Digital artists pretty much know how to flip and play with things in this other dimension called inside your computer.
Yeah, oh no, I do that myself. I'm a Photoshop expert.
Okay.
And I know, and Illustrator and all that stuff. I mean, selecting the type font for readability, the human factor stuff, how the layout of the, should the picture go here or should go here, or,
right.
Should the text flow around it, that kind of stuff.
Okay, as your own artist, that pretty much is going to be your preferences. However, the next step of that would be something I would call a letterer. And that's somebody who is proficient and knows all about type fonts, all about legibility, all about design within a art piece of where you want the lettering to go.
So they could say use Helvetica versus use...
or they can even, if you wanted to take an art piece, say you're a poet, and part of the poetry of your poems is the art that you've sketched as your poetry.
And in fact, that's true with me, so okay.
Well, so that becomes a digital photograph. So you need to not only have the auspices of making a photograph, but then digitalizing it and putting it in the page the right way and having page 12 down at the bottom or whatever you want to do. This is where hiring a letterer would very much assist you in getting that done. The other thing letterers can do is they put the words on the book. They make things, you know, really set like that.
And then what about the all-important role of the editor that you would normally get if you went through a commercial publisher? Who takes on that responsibility if you're self-publishing?
Okay, when you're self-publishing, you're your editor, your friends are your editor, your high school teacher is your proofreader.
I see.
You really make it a family affair,
I
really.
see,
You can buy editors, okay? Another work for hire job. When you're writing with art, you have an editor who starts with your words and doesn't see the art, and then at the end you have an editor who works within the boundaries of your art, confirming that things flow properly, or even to the point where that they make sure that the letterer didn't type LETS instead of LET apostrophe S, okay? Editors, while they're not highly necessary, in some instances people really need
So
them.
it's a possibility at least to do that.
It's very possible to skip that part.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, one of the things I need to mention is that the Chelmsford Center for the Arts has been very honored this year to have won. We got 3 grants, one from the Billerica Cultural Council, 2 from Chelmsford Cultural Council. You're not hearing me? Okay. Cultural Council is, in Chelmsford, has offered us 2 grants. One is for our 4th of July show that we're going to be using in this building. And we are supposed to be having the 4th of July show, so please get your artwork ready. And then the other one is for our running expenses to keep the Art Society going. And we got also one from Billerica. So we have money this year to produce presentations and going forward. And we need our membership to also go ahead and renew their membership and to keep us going. It allows us to hire people like Mary and to do other presentations. So I'm very happy about that. We also are at the point where we're going to have at the end of this month, at the end of April, a cutoff to accept any student who is a high school student who is furthering their education in art to apply for our scholarship. And this year we're having 2 scholarships who are $500 each. And they can be going to higher education. It doesn't have to be painting. It could be anything from pottery to set design to architecture to film. The applications need to be in by the 3rd week of April. And then we will go ahead and pull people in for interviews and then do the actually award for the scholarship. So there's a lot happening. I would recommend that people go onto the Chelmsford Art Society website and see what our newest things are and the application for our scholarships and what's going to be happening going forward with the art show. So if there's no other questions, anybody else in the audience? Then we will say thank you very much for Mary for coming out today and doing the presentation for us. And hope to see you next month when we have another presentation that we were going to be doing from Gwen, who is an artist at the Brush Gallery who will be doing figurative drawing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.